It's one of the most painful, really disorienting experiences a person can have, right? You're trying to engage sincerely, you ask a question, maybe to clarify something or, get closer to the truth, understand a tricky teaching.
Yeah, you're being genuine.
Exactly. And instead of an answer, you get, silence, suspicion, or worst case, you're just completely shut out, socially, emotionally. And the real shock is realizing you weren't shunned for being wrong. You were shunned just for asking.
Just for the question itself, yeah.
That whole mechanism, the really high cost of asking sincere questions, that's what we're diving into today. We've gathered, honestly, a huge stack of sources looking at this from all kinds of angles.
Yeah, we've got religious texts, sociological studies, historical accounts. It's pretty comprehensive.
Right.
And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive is really to give you the blueprint. We want to unpack why. Why does asking honestly often feel like such a threat to a group's stability?
And crucially, is this just something that happens in, say, faith groups?
Or is it, a standard tool? Something all high-identity communities use, whether that's a church, a political party, maybe even an academic department.
Okay, let's get into the core mechanics then. Why does a genuine, humble question suddenly feel like an attack, like a hostile act?
Well, the sources point straight to some deep social psychology. It boils down to 4 main ways the question is perceived as a threat.
4 threats. Okay, what's the first one?
It really starts with survival instinct. The group sees the questioner as a risk. So threat number 1 is a threat to cohesion and identity.
Okay, cohesion and identity. Makes sense.
Yeah, think about it. Any group built on shared beliefs could be belief in God, a sacred text, even just a core ideology. Those beliefs are the glue, they're the foundation.
Right.
So questioning those core tenets, that feels like you're shaking the whole structure, undermining everything that holds them together.
So the group circles the wagons.
Exactly, it's a defense mechanism. Isolate the problem to keep the group intact. It's almost primal.
Wow, okay, pure defense. And the second threat, you said it sounds almost clinical.
Yeah, it does. It's the fear of contagion.
Contagion? Like a disease?
Pretty much. Doubt isn't seen as just one person's issue. It's treated like an ideological virus.
Seriously?
Yeah. The fear is, if one person asks a tough question and the answer isn't, immediately convincing, then others might start doubting too. It could spread. A cascade effect that weakens the whole group's resolve.
So ostracism, shunning, that's like putting the doubter in quarantine.
That's exactly the analogy the sources use. It's a quarantine measure. Stop the intellectual or ideological spread before it takes hold.
That's heavy. Treating genuine curiosity like it's infectious.
Yeah.
It is. And that idea of containment, it leads right into the third threat, the challenge to authority.
Ah, okay. So questioning the belief means questioning the leaders or the source of the belief.
Absolutely. If the official answer, the party line, can't hold up under sincere questioning, what does that say about the authority behind it?
It suggests the authority might be fragile. Exactly. Whether that authority is a person, a sacred book, a political committee, a long-standing tradition. The question implicitly demands that the authority prove its legitimacy.
So the question isn't seen as a search for truth anymore.
No, it gets reframed. It's seen as insubordination, an attack on the established order.
Which brings us to the fourth one. You said this one's maybe the most uncomfortable for the individuals in the group.
Yeah, I think so. It's cognitive dissonance.
Okay. Explain that. How does one person's question trigger that in others?
Well, the questioner forces everyone who hears the question to confront potentially conflicting ideas. Maybe they strongly believe X, but this person raises a really good point about Y.
And that creates internal conflict.
Yes.
Discomfort.
Deep psychological discomfort. And frankly, it's just easier for people in the group to dismiss the questioner, to label them, oh, they're just confused or they're being difficult, they have an agenda.
Easier than actually grappling with the difficult idea.
Much easier. Engaging might mean having to rethink deeply held beliefs, maybe even restructure your whole worldview. Excluding the questioner is a way to avoid that mental stress. It's like a group psychological defense mechanism.
Wow. So the path of least resistance isn't truth, it's comfort, protecting the status quo.
That seems to be the pattern.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really fascinating. Because when you hear all this shunning, contagion, purity, authority, you immediately think, okay, this is about religion.
That's the common assumption, right?
Yeah. But the sources, they push back hard on that.
Emphatically, they say, no, this isn't unique to faith. This is a fundamental tool. They call it social boundary maintenance.
Boundary maintenance, meaning?
Meaning any community, any group with a strong shared ideology uses this mechanism to define who's in and who's out, to protect its borders, essentially.
And you see it everywhere, even in totally secular contexts.
Absolutely everywhere. The sources give tons of examples. Take politics. It's not just about disagreeing on policy. It's about deviating from the accepted orthodoxy. You know, on the right, someone might get labeled a rhino Republican in name only.
Right, basically kicked out of the club ideologically.
And on the left, if you question a core strategy or use the wrong language, you could be called a corporate shill or accused of, I don't know, not being committed enough.
So it's like ideological excommunication.
Precisely. The mechanism is the same. The exclusion has to be swift to prove the group's commitment to its own purity test.
Okay, where else?
Even in places we think of as being all about questioning, like science or academia.
Really? But isn't science built on challenging ideas?
Ideally, yes. But historically, think about Galileo or Alfred Wegener, the guy who proposed continental drift.
Right, people thought he was crazy.
Exactly. They faced ridicule, professional ostracism, denial of funding. Why? Because their questions challenged the established scientific paradigms of the day. Their ideas were treated as heresy by the establishment.
So even scientists protect their sacred cows.
It seems so. And you see it in much more everyday places too, like corporate culture.
How so?
Well, you know those companies with a really strong culture fit emphasis?
Yeah.
If an employee consistently asks, but why do we do it this way? Or suggests maybe the core philosophy isn't working.
They get labeled not a team player.
Exactly. Their genuine inquiry is read as disloyalty. And suddenly promotions dry up or they're subtly pushed out.
Wow. It's the same pattern.
And maybe one of the clearest modern examples is in activist movements, social justice groups.
Go.
Because a focus on unity and ideological purity is often so intense, individuals can get completely canceled, as they say.
For what kind of things?
Sometimes just for using the wrong terminology, or maybe more significantly for questioning the group's strategy or effectiveness. They get branded troublemaker or disruptive.
Which is basically an old tool for enforcing conformity, just in a new setting.
It's the same social machinery, just running on different fuel, ideological fuel instead of theological fuel.
It's kind of ironic, actually. Some sources even point this out in, like, non-believer communities.
How so?
Well, certain atheist or skeptic groups can be so rigid about pure rationalism that if someone, maybe an ex-believer, expresses complex emotions about their past faith, or doesn't adhere strictly enough to rationalist dogma, they can get rejected.
So the very group that champions skepticism ends up shutting down certain kinds of inquiry.
Exactly. The mechanism ends up being fundamentally anti-skeptical. It's fascinatingly contradictory.
So when we look at how people talk about this whole phenomenon, the exclusion, the shunning, there's a really stark divide, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got those who justify it, see it as necessary, and then those who focus entirely on the harm it causes.
Let's start with the justifications, particularly from within more traditional communities.
Yeah.
What's the argument there?
Well, the more conservative or traditionalist view often frames exclusion as a form of protection, spiritual protection for the community.
Okay. They might point to biblical instructions, like Titus 3.0. The sources mention this one. What does that say?
Basically, it advises warning a divisive person once, then twice, and if they persist, have nothing to do with them.
So exclusion is seen as a way to maintain the group's spiritual purity, protect the flock.
That's the idea. Keep the community undefiled by dissenting or divisive ideas.
But then you have the other side of the theological coin, right? The more progressive or reformist views.
Exactly. And they tend to lament this kind of exclusion. They argue that, well, any belief system worth its salt should be strong enough to handle tough questions.
And didn't you mention the theologian Pete Enns earlier? He had a really interesting take.
Yeah, his framework is quite provocative. He talks about the sin of certainty.
The sin of certainty, not the sin of doubt.
Right. His point is that absolute certainty, especially about really complex texts or historical interpretations, can actually lead to rigidity, even cruelty. Because if you're 100% sure you have the answer, then anyone asking a hard question must be, flawed or malicious, or trying to deceive.
Ah, okay.
Enns argues the real virtue isn't absolute correctness, but rather trust, honesty, humility, the willingness to engage with complexity. That, he thinks, makes a community more compassionate.
So it shifts the focus From being theologically right to being pastorally caring.
Precisely. And that leads us straight into the views that focus on the damage, the human cost, the pastoral and counseling perspective.
Right. And this is where terms like religious trauma syndrome, or RTS, come up. Dr. Marlene Winnell coined that, right?
Yeah. And it describes the very real psychological harm, like anxiety, depression, crippling social isolation that people suffer when they leave or are forced out of these high-control authoritarian groups.
Because the demand is for absolute adherence. And if you can't give that, or if you question it,
you're out. And the fallout, according to these sources, can be just devastating.
Especially, you imagine, for former believers who don't see the ostracism as spiritually necessary at all.
Exactly. Many describe it as, quote, an extremely effective manipulative tool used by leaders to keep control.
And that isolation, what does it actually look like for people? Well, sociologists have a term for it. Social death. Social death. Wow. Yeah, think about it. If your entire life, your family, friends, job, your whole identity is wrapped up in that group, being ostracized means losing everything, all at once.
Everything. You become invisible to the people you care about most. And that level of forced isolation, that's what often drives the severe mental health issues associated with RTS.
And speaking of sociologists, this isn't just about individual psychology.
Yeah.
It's deeply embedded in how societies function, right? Think of people like Emil Durkheim.
Yeah, Durkheim's ideas about the sacred and the profane are key here.
Remind us how that works.
Well, Durkheim said, every society designates certain things, beliefs, objects, rituals as sacred. They're untouchable, foundational, they represent the group itself.
Okay, and everything else is profane, ordinary.
Right. So, to question the sacred, whether that's a religious doctrine, a national symbol, a core political belief that's seen as a form of social blasphemy.
Blasphemy against the group's identity.
Exactly. And that act requires a collective response, usually exclusion, to sort of push the profanity away and reaffirm the sacred boundary, restore the group's integrity.
So even arguing about, I don't know, the right way to make coffee in the office break room could be seen as a tiny act of social blasphemy if it challenges the way things are done.
On a micro scale, yeah. The stakes are obviously lower, but the basic mechanism challenging the established norm, facing pushback, it's weirdly similar.
And this mechanism, this pattern, it's not new. History is full of examples.
Oh, absolutely. Often terrifying examples. The past really shows us this playbook in action.
Yeah, the institutions back then were masters of this. I mean, think of the Spanish Inquisition.
Right. Institutionalized enforcement of religious orthodoxy.
Yep.
Using excommunication, even execution.
Or the Puritans in early America. Banishing people like Roger Williams.
And what was his crime?
Basically questioning the entanglement of church and state. Suggesting the government shouldn't enforce religious doctrine. That was enough to get him kicked out.
So, prioritizing group cohesion over individual conscience, institutionalized.
Exactly. But it's not just religious history. Maybe the most classic example of ideological exclusion, Socrates.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Executed by democratic Athens.
Yeah. And what was his charge? Corrupting the youth and impiety, which basically meant
Asking too many awkward questions.
asking too many penetrating questions that poked holes in core Athenian beliefs and identity. He was seen as a threat to the city's stability.
So he had to be silenced to protect the group. It's like the ancient blueprint for modern ideological shunning.
It really is. And if you draw that line straight through history to today, the phenomenon people now call cancel culture.
Yeah.
Functionally, it's operating on the exact same principles as historical excommunication or shunning.
How so? Think about the dynamics. The intense focus on group identity, defining moral purity, the public call-outs and punishments, the resulting social isolation. It's identical. Just the underlying belief system is different social or political orthodoxy instead of theological dogma.
Precisely. The tools developed centuries ago to enforce religious conformity are just being repurposed for today's ideological battles.
And the impact of that formalized shunning, it's still incredibly damaging today.
Absolutely. You look at groups that still practice formal shunning, like, say, the Amish with My Doom or Jehovah's Witnesses with disfellowshipping.
They see it as biblical discipline, right?
They do. But study after study shows the devastating impact on those who are shunned. That social death we talked about. It leads to incredibly high rates of depression, anxiety, even suicide ideation among ex-members.
So the cost of maintaining that group purity, it's often measured in shattered lives.
Tragically, yes.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. What does this mean for you listening to this? The big takeaway seems to be that the stigma, the ostracism faced by someone who asks sincere questions, It isn't just random cruelty.
No, it's not random at all. It's actually a sadly predictable feature of how human groups organize themselves.
It's a human problem, fundamentally. It shows up wherever you have strong beliefs tied tightly to belonging and identity.
Right, because the group's instinct, its need to maintain cohesion and survive, almost always seems to override the value placed on individual autonomy, or, the messy pursuit of uncomfortable truths.
The group protects itself first.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought for you to chew on, something the sources raise implicitly.
Okay, what's that?
If a community, and this could be religious, political, social, academic, whatever, if it has to rely so heavily on tactics like social exclusion, shunning, silencing sincere questioners, just to maintain its core beliefs, doesn't that suggest something about the beliefs themselves? Does it maybe reveal an inherent fragility in those ideas if they can't withstand open inquiry?
What does the price you have to pay to belong to truly say about the strength or maybe the weakness of the ideology holding that group together?
That's the tension to consider.